Thank you so much, Commodore Agustin, and our host, Yusek Garcia. Thank you for the invitation. The title of my presentation is "Why Fight Over Small Rocks in the Middle of the Ocean?" They refer to all these features as small rocks. One of the most challenging aspects in the South China Sea issue is to address the skepticism of some government policymakers, such as members of Congress, and even those at the highest levels of the executive branch, those in the opinion-making business, like media. Yusek Garcia mentioned this. And of course, businessmen who ask the question, why fight over small rocks in the middle of the ocean? I believe that all of us here in this forum, this meeting, are convinced that those small rocks in the ocean are crucial in the regional and global balance of power. A big challenge is to address our own domestic audience and the world audience to convince skeptical folks that the small rocks within the South China Sea will affect our regional and global security in a very decisive way. One of the most challenging aspects, allow me therefore to present my position on these quote-unquote small rocks. I've long voiced out this position since the mid-90s when I first took this up as a member of the Philippine Congress, when China seized Mischief Reef, a feature well within our exclusive economic zone. My position has become more relevant in the light of the ongoing massive reclamation projects of China in the South China Sea, which accelerated last year, 2014. I'm saddened, in fact I'm shocked, when some ask the question, why fight over small rocks in the middle of the ocean, when referring to the West Philippine Sea situation now approaching boiling point? To some, Mischief Reef, Scarborough Shoal, Pag-asa, and now Ayungin Shoal are small rocks not worth fighting for. I don't know if such comments are driven by naivete about geopolitics and warfare, or just dictated by their plain desire to preserve the status quo, because the status quo for them means, number one, peace at all costs in the face of a rising China, or number two, an ideologically based intestinal interlock with China, or number three, fear, not wanting to antagonize the dragon for fear of being devoured. In warfare and geopolitics, the potential force of a territory is not necessarily proportionate to the size of the territory. It is the location that determines how much potential and, in the end, kinetic force can be brought to bear from the territory. In other words, how well one can project power, gain access to a bigger objective, or conversely, prevent access or deny access using that piece of territory, however small. We should learn from history. Note how the Pacific War was won by using tiny atolls, rocks, islets with names like Truk, Tulagi, Saipan, Kwajalein Atoll, Tarawa Atoll, etc., dotting the vast Pacific Ocean as shown by the following map. You can see the little dots west of that line there. That was the West Pacific area in 1941 to 1944. Now we are looking at a smaller part of the West Pacific, the South China Sea. The South China Sea today is considered by all strategic think tanks as the convergence point of the world's three most powerful economic powers: the United States, China, and Japan. Add to that India, Australia, South Korea, and Indonesia. Then the minor powers that are now joining the arms race: Vietnam, the Philippines. In the periphery, her intentions unclear, is Russia. It is without doubt the convergence point of the greatest powers in absolute and relative terms in the history of mankind. Note the strategic location of the Philippines. in the South China Sea. The Philippines is athwart the eastern periphery of the South China Sea. As such, every speck of Philippine territory is strategic in peace and in conflict. China is fanning the flame of conflict with its 9-dash line, which only China respects and the rest dismisses as irrational and without legal and historical basis. And the Philippines has assumed center stage with China's brazen grab using raw naked power of Mischief Reef in 1995 and Scarborough Shoal in 2012. And now they are positioning to grab Ayungin Shoal as well. These territorial claims defy common sense, as shown by the following map. Those rocks being way within the Philippine EEZ and so distant from the Chinese mainland. Those who dismiss Scarborough Shoal as just small rocks in the middle of the ocean do not or refuse to appreciate the shoal's strategic importance. It is only around 120 nautical miles from the shores of Zambales and so close to the country's vital economic and military installations. Subic, Clark, Metro Manila, primary airports and seaports, power plants, Calabarzon, and our Army, Navy, and Air Force bases. Scarborough Shoal is not small. Including the huge lagoon inside, it has an area of 150 square kilometers, almost the size of Quezon City. With little engineering works, its channel can be widened and deepened to make the lagoon accessible to Navy ships. The lagoon's depth is sufficient for China's destroyers. A country with advanced construction capability and financial muscle can transform this into a naval base. One can easily visualize how many ships can be anchored in a lagoon almost the size of Quezon City. Converted into a naval installation, Scarborough Shoal can be used to project power and monitor strategic and tactical communications of the Philippine government, military bases, including the asset or treaty ally, the US, once the rotational bases access agreement is made operational. Missiles can be installed in Scarborough Shoal that can reach in just a few minutes targets in central Luzon, Metro Manila, and southern Tagalog. Under the control of China and once militarized, Scarborough Shoal could be transformed into an unsinkable aircraft carrier permanently parked in our front yard, well within our EEZ. If anyone doubts the convertibility of Scarborough Shoal for military purposes, consider this. More than 60 years ago, the US Navy converted a similar atoll around 1,200 miles from the Philippines into a staging area for the invasion of the Philippines. This was the Ulithi Atoll, with features similar to Scarborough, only around 4 times bigger. Here's Ulithi Atoll. Notice the features are very similar to Scarborough Shoal. Just some small rocks in the middle of the ocean, but transformed to house part of Admiral Halsey's huge Third Fleet that was the vanguard in the invasion of Japan-occupied Philippines in 1944. This was how Ulithi looked on the eve of the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Note the carriers and the battleships and cruisers and destroyers anchored among those small rocks. In a small way, the same is true in considering the strategic potential of Ayungin and Mischief Reef, and what I predict is a power play to have more Chinese military installations in the area to project power, and as a counterfoil against future enhanced bases in the Palawan area for use by the AFP and our treaty ally, and as China's staging area to grab the oil-rich Rectobank with its reputed 5 billion barrels of oil and 55 TCF of natural gas. You can see the Rectobank there, off Palawan and very close to Mindoro. You have Mischief Reef, Panganiban Reef, Ayungin Reef, which is surrounded by Chinese assets. So why fight over small rocks? Now we know. And I'd like to show as a sequel the plans for some of the rocks inside the Spratly South China Sea area as revealed by James. And if they succeed in, for example, militarizing or constructing these airstrips, either in the Mabini Reef area or in some other areas, if you look at the radius of a J-10 interceptor of China, one of their more backward fighters, a 1,000-mile radius from Mabini Reef can encompass the entire Borneo, the entire Philippines, and most of Vietnam. That is how strategic an unsinkable aircraft carrier is inside this practice area. This map shows how serious a security threat the Mabini Reef would be if China succeeds in constructing an airstrip there. From there, China's J-11 fighter can easily cover the entire Philippines with just a 1,000-mile operating radius. The J-11 has a range of 2,000 miles. And another sequel, this came out just a few days ago, from a blog based on the report of James, the fiery cross presence, the reclamation there is already progressing. It would effectively extend China's ability to project power by over 800 kilometers or 500 miles, particularly through Chinese Coast Guard patrols in contested areas and potentially even air operations. Infrastructure improvements are enhancing China's ability to sustain its naval and maritime law enforcement presence in the South China Sea. This is particularly the case at Fiery Cross Reef, where a 5-square-mile project has been under construction since 1988. According to ISS James, Chinese facilities there serve as base for conducting land reclamation projects elsewhere in the Spratlys and host communication equipment, a greenhouse, a wharf, a helipad, and coastal activity. Andrew Erickson, Associate Professor at the U.S. Naval War College, and Austin Strange, PhD at Harvard University, suggests Fiery Cross Reef could eventually sustain a PLA Navy Command and Control Center twice the size of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, a U.S. naval base in the Indian Ocean. China also appears to be constructing an airstrip at Johnson South Reef. So that basically is my presentation, and I would like to repeat my earlier statements on this years ago, months ago, that this to me is a clear and present danger to our country and our allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roy. Any questions?
This is not a question, but an expression.